back to Andertons TV, and today we are discussing the difference between a Stratocaster
and a Telecaster.
Woo!
Controversial.
Controversial.
It's controversial.
Right, we're going to try and keep this snappy. There is a sense that Pete's first sort of, decent guitar was a Telecaster, mine was a Stratocaster, and so I guess that's why we've chosen, to represent each one. Both the guitars, I'm sure, as you know, are made by Fender. They both came out in the early 50s. They're part of that sort of golden generation of guitar manufacturing, came out during that era where some wonderful, wonderful guitars came out. And over the years, obviously, Fender have made many different variants of Strats and Teles. Many companies have copied them.
Many.
But the essence of a Tele versus a Strat hasn't really changed, and wherever you decide to shop in terms of whether you're going Squire or whether you're going custom shop or contemporary versus traditional, this should be a useful kind of like, what is the main difference between the Strat and the Tele?
Yeah, and of course the Tele is best. Of course. And also it says here, if you look right here, the small lettering, it says please like and subscribe there.
Is that what it does, doesn't it? So thank you, Fender, for reminding us to like and subscribe on the stickers. Yeah. We've chosen two guitars from Fender's Vintera 2 range. So Pete has a 60s Tele, I have a 60s Strat. Mm-hmm. Some of the things, there's two or three things that actually are very similar about the Strat and the Tele, and I think that's why so many players find it relatively easy to jump between them. So they have the same scale length, which is the distance from where the saddles are to where the nut is. So you put the same set of strings on each guitar, they'll have the same kind of string tension. They have, again, if you take two guitars from a similar era, so like these two are 60s inspired, they'll have very similar neck carves on them, so they don't feel, they won't feel wildly different.
Both bolt-on necks?
Absolutely. Both
6 aside.
6 in a line tuners, and again, although the headstock shape is different, that's more of a visual thing. If you actually look at the placement of the tuners, they're in the same kind of place.
It's very, very similar.
So it's easy to switch between a Strat and a Tele and still feel comfortable. However, let's talk about the differences now, and we'll demonstrate the tonal differences. Should we start with the most obvious one?
Yes, let's do that. Pickups,
well, your guitar came first, so tell us about the pickups on yours.
Telecaster is a very simple guitar, in my opinion. I think it's the pinnacle. It's the beginning. It's where it all began. So, like Gibson, for instance, 2 pickups.
So what you're saying is he started at the top of the mountain and walked down.
Not walked, it just rolled down. And there was just Jazzmasters and Jaguars and Conados. So it was like, Telecaster still on the top of the mountain. Anyway, you got 2 pickups. You got a neck pickup here, and then you got a bridge pickup. And I think the special thing about the bridge pickup compared to the Strat pickup is that underneath it is a little metal or what's it called, like metal plate, which gives it sort of in my opinion, just a bigger, fatter, more raucous, meatier sound. You only have 3 positions, so you've got either the neck on, both pickups at the same time, or the bridge pickup. You got a volume and a tone. Super simple. I mean, it was super simple in the beginning. And like Les Paul, I think when you play a Telecaster, you work a lot with this, and that's why this is so, it's the simplicity I really love about them. Yeah,
so the bridge as well is what's called a fixed bridge. There's no tremolo system, no moving parts.
No. And it's got it's a string through body, which means that the strings are attached straight to the wood. There's nothing in between. Like if you look at a Strat, you can't see inside there, but it's got, actually the strings are not really attached to the body.
No, agreed.
As it is at the same, which in my opinion gives this sort of it just gives more resonance with the whole body. We can talk upgrades later, but there is some stuff you can do here to upgrade the Telecaster.
Let's hear your 3 positions just with a clean tone, and then I'll talk what's on mine, and we'll talk about we'll hear that as well.
So here's the neck, full on tone on volume. So that's the bridge. Here's the middle position. Got that snappiness going on. And the bridge.
Oh!
So there's a lot of tones in there. That's even before you start fiddling around with volume and tone. You know, a lot of people...
Hear how the tone sounds backed off, because that's another difference between the Strat and the Tele.
So yeah, what I tend to do is when I'm on a neck pickup, I'll probably most of the time have tone full up. Back off. See, that we get to upgrades in a bit with the pickups as well, but... Almost get sort of a jazzy humbucker style vibe on there. Middle position, that's the interesting one when you start fiddling with that, because that's when you get the... And people say you can't get that position 2 and 4 sound. You can get that. It's not exactly the same, but it's definitely there. And the bridge. It's got such a nice... You know what I mean? Even that pickup in itself, that's why they did the Esquire, where it was just one pickup on the back, right?
Indeed.
Well, look, we can, sorry to interrupt, we can continue with doing drive pedals, and because I think it's much more than just a clean sound with this. There's so many layers that you can do with this because it's so simple. Anyway, sorry.
So 2 pickups, 3 basic settings on there.
Super simple.
Super simple.
Yeah.
And I think, again, the Telecaster on the whole appeals to players that enjoy the simplicity and also the tuning stability, because there's no moving parts on the bridge, so it's very stable for tuning. And I sort of think as well, some players enjoy the challenge of a Telecaster because there is a bit less on it, and so therefore you've got to work these things a bit harder.
There's definitely a challenge.
So 3 years later, the Strat came out.
Was it 3 years later? 54.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I've got 3 pickups here. Now, again, there is a bit of a difference here. One thing that you might be looking at going is, why does this pickup look different to this pickup?
Yeah.
Well, it is just a cosmetic thing. If I grab this guitar here, in fact, it doesn't really matter what guitar, and Taylor does a close-up, you can actually see the purple guitar I'm holding here, again, just for cosmetic reasons, has had the top of that pickup cover removed. So you can see underneath, it's the same basic concept of a single coil pickup.
To that, can I please add something to that? When in fact, is that this pickup is mounted straight into the body with the screws. So that pickup is not floating like it is on there.
Yeah.
So, which, in my opinion, again, for that resonance to resonate into the body.
And not just your opinion. Eddie Van Halen, of all people, was insistent that his pickups sounded better when they were screwed straight into the body rather than to a scratch plate. So again, the Stratocaster has 3 single coil pickups. They are all mounted to this plastic scratch plate.
They'll all come off.
Underneath here is just a cavity where all the wires and stuff are stored. John Mayer wrote a song about that. Now, I've got a 5-way switch. The 5-way switch didn't actually come along until the 80s.
Yeah.
Prior to that, it was a 3-way switch, so you would have just had this pickup or this one or this one. But players worked out there was this way to sort of wedge the pickup selector in a way that you could get 2 pickups simultaneously. And then Fender introduced that as a standard feature.
I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier.
Yeah, me too. Now, one of the things that is different, when I'm using 2 pickups together, although the wiring is still what's called parallel wiring, so it's not like a humbucker, you're hearing both pickups simultaneously rather than the sound going into one and then into the next one, which is how a humbucker works.
Yeah.
On a Stratocaster, the middle one is wound in the opposite direction to these 2. So when I have a one of these positions where either these two or these two are selected. Some people call it an out of phase sound, which isn't technically true, but it is a different kind of sound because you've got this sense of the two pickups not working against each other. You'll see what I mean. Anyway, I'm going to turn all my pedals off again. So I'm using a different amp, but it's still a clean sound. Yeah. And I'll just run through my 5 settings again with my volume and tone controls all the way up. Sorry,
so the volume, the tone control changed as well later on, didn't it? Because it didn't used to have tone control for...
So it used to be this tone control was this pickup, this tone control was this pickup, and the bridge pickup never had a tone control. What's generally considered now as modern wiring is this does work with the tone,
which probably comes from this because it's so handy.
So anyway, here you go. Neck. A little bit brighter. Obviously, we have to take into account they're two different amplifiers, but a lot of that brightness is coming from the fact, again, I think the Tremolo system has a zingier tone. Perhaps we can just get a picture on screen now of what this would look like underneath. And as Pete rightly pointed out, my strings, are strung through a steel block that sits on the back of the trem system, and then I can use the arm
to wiggle. It is screwed in with it's got 6 screws there. That tremolo is a 6-screw trem.
This is a vintage style trem system.
So those 6 screws is basically attached to the wood, but that's all the...
Correct.
That's all the...
again, when we come to talking about modifications you can do to Strats, we'll talk about the trem system. So I think it is a zingier... Now, the first, and a lot of guitar players love the neck pickup on a Strat. Now, as soon as I go to this position here, it's known as position 4. So position 1 is there, 5 is here. So position 4. I think it's a softer sound than the Tele in that middle position.
Middle position? Yeah. So what are you playing? Just gonna put a little bit louder than you, but I'm gonna roll that tone back. So
I think you can hear the brightness there, which you don't get because of the fact this middle pickup. I'm using a pick.
All right, bit more hunky.
These two guitars are siblings, right?
Yeah.
So there's similarities. Then it's not like a Les Paul versus a Strat or anything like that. Anyway, that's that position 4. Position 3 is the middle pickup on its own. And you'll notice this. All electric guitars, the closer the pickup gets to the bridge, the brighter the sound becomes. So that's all that's happening as I'm going back. It's the same 3 pickups.
That is very understated, that pickup.
Yeah, I think I remember saying once in a video, I don't think anybody uses a middle pickup on its own, and then a whole list of comments came in about all the guitar players that do. Middle. Then again, we've got this position 2, which is these two together, but very similar sound to position 4. And then position 5, which, if I'm honest with you, is probably the pickup that gets the most criticism on a Strat, because it's very bright. And it doesn't have the thickness that the Telecaster pickup has in the bridge, and it's not, again, it's because it is a slightly different design of pickup. It's mounted onto a plastic scratch plate. It's not part of this integral sort of bridge system.
Where the strings are sitting in,
Yeah, but if you give it the...
It hardly does anything to compare.
So you can hear how much fatter that back pickup is there. And I think that's why you see such a popular modification to a Strat is to put a humbucker in the bridge position because it just compensates for that.
There are also pickups that has got Strat pickups that has got a plate underneath them, so they're slightly more like a Telecaster bridge.
Maybe you're going, why is the back pickup on both guitars on a slant? And that's essentially, that was Leo Fender messing around with this idea that if you just moved the pole pieces under the bass strings slightly closer to the middle, and you moved the pole pieces slightly closer to the bridge, you'd get this slightly more balanced sound. If it was straight on, it becomes even brighter.
Yeah.
So that is my basic run through of my 5 sounds. Now I have volume, same as Pete has. I'm not a big user of the volume control on my Strat unless I just want to turn it on or off. Listen to players like Jeff Beck, who are sitting on...
Also played a Telecaster.
Yeah, well, Strats, he played everything, didn't he, Jeff? And you'll see some amazing kind of swell sounds that you can do. I think, actually, if you look at the relative position of the volume control on the Strat, it's probably easier to play
absolutely.
And adjust at the same time.
Unless you're a great cock with his massive hands.
Yeah. And then the tone controls, again, I might use that a tiny bit, but it's not... I think there are some positions, if you just roll back 3 or 4, if you go all the way back, it just sounds like someone's thrown a blanket over your amp. So on this one, the tone control is adjusting these 2 pickups, and this tone control is adjusting the back pickup. So that is my pickups. Let's talk a bit more about the bridge. I know we've touched on both of these, and again, the Tele bridge over the years has had a few different variants, but originally tell us about that.
Well, so this is the 60s bridge. It's got steel saddles on. Originally it was brass, and I'm a big fan of brass. I changed all mine out to brass if they don't have it already, because it just gives it a more rounded and lovely. It's softer, isn't it? It's softer. Steel is more singy, pingy.
I wonder if that is just... I wonder if guitar players in the 50s were bringing their guitars back and saying, oh, my bridge is slightly, the saddle is wearing a big of a groove in it. And Leo decided to go to steel. But I agree. It's more... Well, no, I don't know. You get a real mix nowadays. Some are steel saddles, some are brass.
I mean, if you look at Jimmy Page's Telecaster, the Dragon, he had a string-through body. He went through the bridge here, not through the body, and it was a steel saddle, so it's much more ringy and pingy. And people say that doesn't really make any difference, but it actually makes huge difference. So on my Teles, as you can see, they all have the brass saddles on it, which is an amazing upgrade in my opinion. It's funny, you see, the old days this would come with this ashtray over it. So I don't know why, a cover that would cover this. And the reason why this bit is shiny, I don't know if you can see that, and this bit isn't, is because Leo Fender was like, well, when you got the cover on it, the only bit you're going to see is this bit. You're not going to see this with the cover on it, so only make this shiny. So we save some money
to get the other bit shiny.
To get that shiny.
Mad.
I mean, it's different types of bridges. There are ones where they cut this bit off here. There's ones where there's nothing on at all. I'm a fan of this because I can rest my fingers on it, and I feel again, the more metal that is attaching this, and this is more stiff. The whole structure of this whole thing is less rigid, so it attaches to the body, which I think just gives it that more. The sustain in the tone is hangs in there, especially when you're on the bridge pickup with a bit of gain on it.
So that. These originally had just these 3 saddles, so each saddle took a pair of strings, if you like. And I suppose, again, people would argue that if you really, really want to fine-tune the intonation of your guitar, you're better off having an individual saddle for each string, or you can even see on this one of these are what's called intonation compensated saddles. Probably getting a bit deep for this video now.
This is a Wilkinson saddle, but you can actually see on this one here.
Or this one. Here's one that's actually had a... Actually, this is probably a bad example because this has had its bridge update, modified to be a trem system. Yeah, look at the other one. But what we're showing is you can have 6 saddles on a Telecaster.
And this is a string through like a Telecaster. So there's lots of options. If you want to make sure you're in tune. I mean, this is the upgrades that you can get into a deep dive into this.
But fundamentally, I think the thing on the Telecaster about the bridge, it does add a meatiness to it, and because there's no moving parts, or no, not like a trem system.
Yeah, the
it's very stable. Once it's in tune, it stays in tune.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it?
The tremolo system on a Strat, again, different kind of idea. You can do that, which I love. I think I can do it. Now, the tremolo system, I think, over the years was used from early days like Hank Marvin for that very stuff. Yeah. Just a nice bit of vibrato on the note. Isn't that also interesting as well? Is that modulating pitch is not tremolo.
Yeah,
that is vibrato.
Yeah.
So strictly speaking, this shouldn't even be called a tremolo unit.
It should be called a vibrato system.
Whatever. When you got to players, when Jimi Hendrix hit the scene, and all of a sudden it's like, you're all of us go,
that stays in tune really
not
well.
Too bad, but if I was to relentlessly do that,
Yeah.
And certainly if you look at some more modern guitar players and how much they abuse the trem system, of course you get tuning issues.
Yeah.
Because the tremolo system just won't return to pitch, or strings will be moving, getting stuck in the nut, stuff like that. So again, over the years, you've seen other manufacturers develop different kinds of trem systems.
Yeah.
Companies like Floyd Rose locking trem systems.
Vega trem recently.
Yeah, even Fender use. I think actually Leo Fender developed the first two-point trem, but when he was at GNL.
Yeah.
Anyway, so if you see another, perhaps we'll show up on screen now as well. If you see a trem system where it's mounted to two posts that are just at either end of the trem system, that's called a two-point trem, and that generally is accepted that kind of is a bit floats a bit more reliably with regards to tuning. Yeah. I love a trem system.
You love a trem system.
Although interesting, on a lot of my Strats, I take the Eric Clapton approach, which is I'll talk about that, where you almost get rid of the trem system.
That's another thing, isn't it? Like John Mayer, for instance, like one player who flattens it to the back and sets it to the back because he believes that's what gets most. And you rarely see him with a tremolo arm on it, anyway.
Well, look, I kind of feel like we should do some drive sounds, talk about some of our favourite modifications we can do with this, and kind of let you get on with your days, because, some people go, what's the difference between a Strat and a Tele? And they want like a 1 minute answer, but there isn't a 1 minute answer.
The only answer is to just get both.
Is both, yeah. So,
and the Tele's best, of course.
Let's hear light gain and heavier gain on your board.
The Dane, which is set like yours, actually, I can see they're set exactly the same. So on the neck pickup.
God, that's barely any distortion at all, is it?
But
it's
it is,
just a
though.
fat thing.
It is, though. But that's the beautiful thing about the Telecaster, in my opinion, and the Dane. That's why, because that was developed to play. So when you go here. And you hit on the bridge. All of a sudden, there's so much more drive. And you go, that might be a bit bright. You turn that down.
I've never seen John Mayer play a Telecaster.
I have.
But it's super rare, right?
Yeah, it's super rare. He's not good enough.
I've seen him play 335s, I've seen him play
SGs,
I've seen him play Charvels, Jacksons, the whole thing. I've literally never seen him play a Telecaster.
I'll send you some pictures of it. But I think it's a rock machine, it needs that. I mean, and then you got Albert King, right? It's got that ice picky sound. But it also got that. And I love the way that an overdrive pedal can have such an array of drive from even though it's set the same, does that make any sense? Does that make sense? If I go higher gain, green side of the protein. That's the sound, right? But again, same pedal sound, so it takes a little while to. I think people just go, I'm turning everything up, and then you go, oh, that's too bright on a Telecaster, and the middle position doesn't sound any good. But once you learn what it can do, and the simplicity of not having 5 switches and middle position here and that, and then another tone control, when you're in the moment, you just want that, you know.
It's a great sounding guitar. It's a great sounding guitar.
And the way I think my favorite bit is that how it does with overdrive pedals. That I don't have to change another overdrive to get more or less gain.
We sort of probably should have talked about this right at the top of the video. Obviously, the two body shapes are iconically different.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily know that I feel. I mean, aesthetically, I've always liked the sort of the curvier edges on the Strat versus the Telecaster. Yeah, absolutely. The Strat was the first one that had this kind of belly cut here. There are other Teles that do have that belly cut vibe.
It's not a Telecaster, but you know that's got that sort of different shapes on it. You know.
I mean, really, from a ergonomic perspective, the only difference from a playing perspective is this addition of the other double cut here, the additional cutaway. But I've never sat with a Telecaster feeling like I can't get my thumb high enough up the neck. So I don't think it's, but that might be, you know, my gut feeling is it's more of a visual statement than anything to do with a playing statement.
These are also just 21 frets, worth mentioning.
Yeah. Maybe if there were more frets, I might find that the double cut. I just personally, I've never had a Telecaster and gone, oh yeah, it's a problem playing up here.
You know what? This is a single cut, right? A Les Paul is a single cut. I know people go, there's nothing the same at all, but I feel like the Les Paul and the Telecaster is in the same vein of guitars. Even though the humbucker, if you got a Les Paul with a nice set of PRF pickups that is like open and not like overly high wound, hot wound, they're two very similar guitars. That's why you see Jimmy Page play both. You know, and you go, oh, I'm sorry, I played a Les Paul there. No, he played a Telecaster on the bridge.
A lot of the albums were Teles,
a lot of that stuff, like Bruce Springsteen, when he just plays his up front, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's got that Les Paul vibe.
Well, look.
Anyway, I mean.
So let's do some Strat tones with gains. So my board is typically...
Do the gain first, just the gain side, because they're set up exactly the same now.
Right.
So we got just a little bit of gain.
I use the gain as my sort of lightest. And a bit like Pete, again, if I just play softly, it doesn't really sound like there's a gain pedal on, but...
Now go to the bridge pickup and just see what it does. If I go to the bridge pickup, there's just more gain in it.
Tele wins on the bridge every time over a Strat, in my opinion. But it's the bridge pickup on the Strat for me is the only thing
Achilles
about
heel, right?
It is.
A little bit,
it is that sort of. Although, again, ironically, in the 1950s, when a lot of guitar players would go for the thinnest, brightest sounding pickup on the guitar when recording, because that was how they cut through on a record. So that's why a lot of those early sort of Buddy Holly and Shadows kind of sounds are very, very bright,
very
Strat sounding guitar sounds. So again, on my board, and I've been through my board a couple of times in previous videos, but again, I like to have different layers of overdrive.
You like to do that, don't you?
So yeah, so.
Good sound though.
Yeah, and so that position 1, position 2, 3. And the bass end now is just great.
That position 4 is
and
just
then
magical.
what I'll typically do for a lead solo is boost into the Danes. I don't know, what would he have done? Position 2 for that? This sounds great. If I want to go, I mean, again, I tell you where the Strat does beat the Telecaster, hands down, no argument. It's just iconic guitar players. Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, John Mayer, Eric Johnson.
They all played Telecasters as well.
No, they're famous for playing Strats,
yes,
aren't
but
they,
they
really?
have played it. On
David Gilmour.
Yeah.
Mark Knopfler. I know he played lots of different guitars, but it's,
No,
and I suppose
you're right.
kind of, there is that sort of sense of, I don't know what would have happened. Did Jimmy ever play a I mean, again, that's just a fuzz pedal into a clean amp. It's probably not exactly what Jimmy played. And then, I mean, you can go heavier.
You did. Oh, you didn't.
Even Yngwie plays a basic Strat with a scalloped fretboard and some slightly hotter pickups on it, but it's a Strat nonetheless. I mean, look.
None of those are as cool as people who play.
Silly other things we never talked about. Again, and if they're relatively new to guitar, you'll be going, well, what's the difference between the dark fretboard ones and the light fretboard ones and stuff? And it is just that. It is, some of them are made with a maple fretboard, some of them are made with a rosewood fretboard, or in more recent years, you've seen some other darker woods used, like ebony, palfero, laurel, things like that.
Makes no difference.
Yeah, I mean. It's an interesting one, isn't it? That it's not really catalogued anywhere exactly why Leo Fender decided at the end of the 50s to introduce rosewood as an option on his guitars.
Why did he? Maybe
Gibson had always used rosewood. Lots of other brands had always used rosewood.
Yeah.
I suspect, knowing that Leo loved his guitars to look new and work, last as long as possible, I suspect a lot of the decision to go to rosewood was because maple fretboards, as they start to wear, go dirty, whereas obviously on a rosewood fretboard you can't see the dirt. In more recent years, a lot of those sort of tone wood debates will talk about maple fretboards having a slightly different tonality to a rosewood fretboard, but that's a personal.
Wasn't it a thing? It was easier to make, instead of doing the skunk stripe on the back. Wasn't it easier to just lay the truss rod in and then the board on top of it instead of having? I mean, you can get to it again, can't you?
Yeah, and again,
I don't know.
I think unless you're a relatively experienced guitar player and you really are making a decision about what you like in terms of feel and tone between the two fretboards, just go for the one you like the look of. Yeah. It really, it's one of the more minor things on guitar.
I think go for both, really. That's just an excuse to have both.
Hopefully this hasn't ended up being one of our usual, this will be a 5-minute video and then half an hour later we're still rambling.
No, it's good.
Let's talk about so again, what players drew you to the Telecaster and what are your favourite mods to do to a Telecaster?
I mean, Prince is probably the one that's played, he played his H. Anderton Telecaster, which I saw way back. But I think my first sort of encounter was when I just first started, and in school I was going to, when I was about 11, 10, there was an old Ibanez spaghetti logo, butterscotch blonde telly hanging on the wall, which I plugged into a Leslie. That was like the first thing.
Wow, into a Leslie speaker as well. Leslie. Amazing.
And I remember one of the teachers, you know, those little things here, he's like, I always liked to play it on the neck pickup. He's like, you're going to be a jazz player when you grow up, you know. I remember that he said that. But there was just something that drew me to it. And then, of course, Prince playing it. And I've played Strats for a long time. You know, after that, I played Strats for the longest time. And then I was looking for the purple one that came up. Yeah. And there's just something about it in the sound. But anyway, my favorite mods to do to it is probably, depending on which one it is, if you buy a custom shop or something more expensive, you get some really nice pickups. Otherwise, I would, you know, I've got my signature set of pickups, which are Monty's ones. I like to put them in because I know how they work. The neck pickup is a little bit hotter, a little bit more like a Strat pickup, and the bridge is also a little bit more low. It's got more low end and top in it, a bit more controllable with the volume and the tone control. Definitely put the brass saddle on it. I always do that. And then most importantly for me is to get a nice setup and having a set of 10s on it, the strings, because it makes the guitar there's a bit more resonance in it. Maybe some wiring, you know, if you want to do that.
I'm a fan of that.
It's so simple. It doesn't need very much.
I'm less of a fan. You know, a couple of the clever mods, I've liked that mod where you see them go to a 4-way switch and it gives you that series parallel switch. Yeah. And I don't dislike them when you see the humbucker in the neck, but there is something, I think every guitar player should just have a straight up Telecaster. Don't just stick with Leo's original design. 3-way switch, 2 single coil pickups.
Because it's a lesson. It's a lesson in tone and in how to play a simple guitar. There's the Nashville Tele, which I'm really intrigued with, which I never really got into. But when you take
the 3 pickups on it,
you take a single coil Strat pickup and put it in the middle here, and 5-way selector switch. So that's an interesting one I want to go to at some point. But there's not much I'd like to do to them. As long as they've got that.
So that's a Fender. Hold your Chapman up. Because we talk about modifications. Obviously, Pete did work with Chapman to do, and that's got quite a, slightly different body shape, neck shapes.
Yeah, it's quite a similar neck shape. It's slightly larger than the neck, not very much. Oops. You got the little calf down here. Not that that's more aesthetic, isn't it? There's a little rounded thing on the top there in the shoulder. When you're sitting down a lot, this can get quite sharp on your arm. And then we put a belly cut in.
Yeah. But that single cut Telecaster original design has inspired thousands of other similar looking guitars.
And what can you do, what is there to add to perfection? Just little bits and pieces, isn't it? Another fret and.
So Strat-wise, and again, my first electric guitar was a red Squire. Actually, it wasn't a Squire, but it was a Far Eastern, for a very small period, maybe even just a year, Fender made in Korea what really was a Squire spec guitar, but they put Fender on it.
Yeah,
that was my first. That was my first electric guitar in red. So I've always enjoyed these, and definitely I grew up listening to Eric Clapton during the 80s and David Gilmour, and so I just wanted to play Strats.
Yeah.
My favourite modifications on these are, I had an American Strat, I still have an American Strat, it might even be here. It is here! In fact, this was a good example of...
that's a good mod.
This had a lot of mods done to it.
Mod.
So this is my 1988 American Strat.
Wow.
So I put locking tuners on it. I put Graphtec saddles on it, and I changed it to an HSH, so humbucker, single humbucker, pickup configuration. The trem system on this, I have another Strat here with some cool mods on it. Probably my favorite.
You're just a Strat guy, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're such Clapton.
I know. My favorite mod is the Clapton mod.
Yeah, it's great.
So there's 2 things that you need to do. Well, maybe 3 things. But the first thing he did was on his Blackie Strat was the trem system is what's called blocked off. So unlike this blue one, which you can see wobbles away like that, this one is screwed down super tight, and there's a piece of wood. This is very agricultural, basically, but this is what Clapton did. You just basically stuff something in the back of the guitar so the trem system can't move.
A bit more like a Telecaster.
Yeah, a lot like that. And then he has this mid-boost circuit that I don't know who designed that, whether that was someone at Fender or someone else, but basically he has one tone control, so this tone control acts across all 3 pickups, and then this tone control isn't a tone control, it's a boost, 20 dB mid boost. And you listen to any of those Clapton 1980s kind of early 90s real singing, sustaining, feedbacking thing. It's a valve amplifier with the boost wound up. So they're my 2 favourite Strat mods, and I guess that's the beauty of this. Same as the Telecaster, this shape has inspired a million copies. Fender make a million different Strats, lots of other brands will copy this design, and there's a huge aftermarket of different pickups and trem systems and boosts and tuners, and you know, you knock yourself out.
I saw a quote from Joe Bonamassa. He said Fender is in a, and Gibson, they are in a weird business. Imagine if 50 years ago, what is this, 70 now? 70 years? 70 years ago, if Ford had made the same car today as they did 70 years ago, but that's what they're doing. They're making the same product they did 70 years ago, still to this day.
Do you know,
there's nothing changed about this. Nothing.
Although to a certain degree,
it's a weird business to be in, isn't it?
That cars still have 4 tyres, a combustion, up until relatively recently, combustion engine.
Like phones, how much it's gone, it's improved so much. Or improved, I still like old cars.
The guitar, there really have been, Strandberg is probably the only brand that have really
pushed it into the next level.
Here's like a different approach. But you're right, it's there's not a lot, they really did do a great job 70 years ago. All the brands did, Gibson, Fender, Rickenbacker, they just did a great job.
I tell you what, these 2 are more different than an SG and a Les Paul.
They definitely are. I mean, really, apart from the body,
Gibsons that are
there's
as different
not much.
Name me 2 Gibsons that are as different as Strat and Tele. You can't, because they're all humbuggers. They're all.
I agree.
I don't think there
Firebird maybe starts to get different.
Mini humbuggers, but hey,
that's another video for another day. My God, this has gone on for a long time.
Let's
Have we got time for a jam?
Let's get out of here. Let's do that.
Okay,
Let's do that.
Thanks for watching. Hope that was informative. Comment below all the things we got wrong. See you later.
Thank you.